Welcome, everyone. My name is Jennifer Edmond. I'll be both the chair and one of the presenters in today's webinar on Trustworthy AI by Design. And I want to just briefly introduce the group that is hosting this webinar today, because I think it's quite a unique and different approach to having this kind of work going on. We are the AI, Big Data and Democracy Taskforce, which sounds very official. But what it boils down to is we are a series of European projects with similar goals and similar ambitions, but each approaching the challenge of technology and democracy in a different way. This is actually, and the reason why I say this is unique is because we were at one point competitors for the same pot of funding, and now we are all funded projects who are working not just on our own approaches, but also in parallel. So I hope that will mean that we'll have a very interesting session today, and one that gives you a number of different perspectives on the way in which European funded collaborative projects can approach this problem or this challenge rather, in a year where the questions of democracy and the processes of democracy across the world seem so much on everyone's minds. That's all I want to say in terms of introduction. And I'd like to actually now turn to our first speaker and our first project, which is the AI for Gov project, which will be presented by my colleague, George Manias. George, I'll turn over to you for the first presentation.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you very much, everyone that has attended this webinar of the AI for the AI and Democracy Task Force. Please allow me to share my screen in order to share the presentation with you. Hopefully, you can see the presentation. Okay, so let's begin. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you all very much for this opportunity to be here in this webinar that we focus on trustworthy AI by design and the specific insights that have been derived from the task force on AI, big data and democracy, where also the AI for Gov project participates. My name is George Manias from the University of Piraeus Research Center in Greece, and I am the technical coordinator of the AI for Gov project. Together, we will explore the project itself, its main pillars, the challenges that the utilization of AI and big data faces, the bias that is incorporated in the overall cycle of the artificial intelligence, the ethical aspects that can be posed from the utilization and development of artificial intelligence in the modern digital societies, and of course, how the AI for Gov project seeks to mitigate these challenges through its integrated solution. To begin with, as Jennifer also mentioned, the AI for Gov project was also a competitive project in the context of the Horizon Democracy 01 call. It started on 1st of January and will 2023 and will end on 31st of December 2025. It's a multidisciplinary approach and joint effort from 12 organizations ranging within and across 8 countries within and across Europe. And its main pillars are 5. At first, to safeguard and foster the fundamental elements of human rights and democratic values through the utilization and development of AI and big data solutions. Moreover, in order to unpack a concrete and comprehensive research methodology, it seeks to build upon applicable laws, protocols, and regulations such as GDPR, EU AI Act, and also to be in line with ethical recommendations for that artificial intelligence. For example, that the recommendations that can be derived from the high-level expert group on AI. Moreover, because bias is incorporated in the overall cycle of artificial intelligence, it seeks to also list, explore, and remove bias by design in the overall development of AI and big data solutions. Moreover, in order to enhance the overall policy-making domain, it seeks to provide enhanced policies that are easy to use, transparent, trustworthy, and of course, bias and dissemination-free. And finally, it seeks also to raise the awareness and trust of stakeholders on ethical AI by reassuring them that it's leveraged, responsible, ethical, and trustworthy. So the AI for Gov lies on the intersections of AI and citizens through the engagement and the protection of the human rights and the European values of them, the ethical AI in order to be in alignment with regulations, and of course the development and application of AI. AI and data makes the world, our world, the digital world goes around. But of course, they come also with big challenges and problems. The big power comes also with big responsibility. We have to be aware about the challenges and the main problems that the use and development of AI poses. Several domains have impacted negatively by the utilization of AI. So we have to always bear in mind that artificial intelligence requires transparency, trustworthiness, and fairness, but also to avoid bias, inequality, and discrimination by design from the first round of the development towards the utilization of it. And if we want to see a concrete pipeline of the overall artificial intelligence life cycle, let's have this typical workflow, starting from the data collection, then to the processing, transformation of the data, and of course, the development of the different AI models, the continuous evaluation and validation of them, and finally, the deployment in real-world scenarios and real-world applications, but of course, with feedback loops also with the end user. And throughout this life cycle, where bias is incorporated. Bias is incorporated in each specific step. From the beginning, we have bias in the data set, in the raw data that we collect, because some of the data sets may be unbalanced, are unreliable, and etc. Bias is also incorporated in the processing of the data during the transformation, the cleaning, and etc. So bias is also incorporated in the preparation of them. Bias is also incorporated in the algorithms. Algorithms can also, if they are not focusing on trustworthiness, fairness, and trusted development of them, we incorporate bias. And finally, is also incorporated in the operations. In this feedback loop, let's say, where policymakers and end user, without concrete knowledge of the domain of the results that are being provided by the utilization of the AI models, can incorporate bias and wrong decisions and wrong feedback loops in the overall evaluation of the AI models. So if we want to see the four main pillars with regards to the ethical aspects that we have to bear in mind by design, the development and utilization of artificial intelligence, and how to mitigate them in order to foster trusted and transparent AI, we have to start always from the regulatory frameworks that we have to bear in our minds. Without regulations, without applicable laws, then we cannot foster regulatory and responsible utilization and development of artificial intelligence. So it is highly mandatory to develop regulatory frameworks that will protect and safeguard the citizens' rights and ensure the transparency throughout the whole life cycle of artificial intelligence. This comes along also with the protection of the personal data. We need strict measures in order to protect the individual's personal data and safeguard their fundamental rights. The next step is, of course, to provide transparency in the overall development and utilization of the different artificial intelligence algorithms. This can be accomplished through the provision of transparent, explainable, and unbiased AI-based solutions in the overall decision-making progress. And finally, human in the loop. We have to foster the integration between artificial intelligence models and humans for optimal results and for enhancing and improving the overall performance and accuracy of the final results that are being provided by the artificial intelligence models. Now, how the AI for Gov project accomplishes these challenges and addresses these main pillars of the ethical AI through the introduction of trusted artificial intelligence in the overall decision-making approach. And in order to accomplish our targets, we have 5 specific solutions that range from conceptual to technical developments that are incorporated in the overall policy-making life cycle. We start from the holistic regulatory framework, the policy-oriented visualization of workbench, the explainable AI library, the data governance framework that governs the overall implementations of our tools, and of course, the bias detection and mitigation. These are the 5 main solutions that AI for Gov project introduces in the modern digital societies. And through these 5 modules, we are able to tackle the respective targets. At first, research on AI and the rule of law, where we unpack and research on effective monitoring and control protocols of existing legislations and non-regulatory frameworks related to artificial intelligence in order to develop the holistic regulatory framework that we introduced in the context of the project. Next, we seek to provide fair and trusted AI towards addressing bias, specifically bias and discrimination. And in order to do this, we seek to introduce a set of tools and solutions that cover the issue of bias in decision making. And specifically, we have utilized the bias detector toolkit that seeks bias on both the dataset and AI models and tackles it, the holistic regulatory framework, and the virtual unbiased framework that incorporates the policy-oriented visualization workbench, the explainable AI library, and different tools of the project. Through this, we are able to provide reliable, transparent, and interpretable AI-based solutions, improving the reliability, fairness, and explanations by also allowing people, the end users, to reflect on the results of the AI-based models through especially the utilization of explainable AI library and the novel approach that we introduced in the context of the project, which is the situation-aware explainability in the overall business processes and in the decision-making process. Through this, we are able to identify and model bias and discrimination through different methods and techniques that we incorporate in the overall detection and mitigation of bias. And finally, to provide AI-based solutions in order to enhance the citizen representation and participation, especially by developing hybrid citizen-centered education approaches, but also by leveraging the blockchain technology in the overall life cycle of the project. If we want to see these tools, how they have been integrated, they have integrated under the umbrella of a common AI for Go platform that is modular, flexible, resilient, and scalable. So through this integrated architecture, we are able to provide an improved and enhanced platform that integrates and incorporates all the different functionalities of the tools that were presented previously, but also by leveraging the blockchain technology, policy recommendation toolkit, and etc., in order to enhance and improve the final results. And if we want to see this as integrated use case, integrated scenario, an end-to-end scenario, you can see here that we impact the policymakers, the citizens, and the whole end users in the overall policymaking domain. We start by utilizing data lakes, then we foster the identification and mitigation of bias both in the dataset and models. We incorporate explainability and integrate this with the AI models that we have in order to integrate the results in the policy recommendation toolkit and finally provide and visualize the final results and policies in the policy-oriented visualization workbench that I mentioned before. All these are governed through the blockchain. The data, the models, the policies are governed through the blockchain utilization. So the AI for Go project benefits the citizens as it provides transparency, increased trust and engagement, access and inclusive participation, training and professional development of public servants, service and process improvement in public institutions, and of course, enhanced accessibility and inclusivity. And now is the time to act. This is why we have this task force with sister projects in order to tackle the different challenges and problems that we face in the development and utilization of AI. Now is the time to act, and if not now, then when? Thank you very much for your attention in my presentation. Let's catch up. I am at your disposal for any further question, and this is the presentation from the AI for Go project.
Thank you very much for that, George. That was a very useful and comprehensive overview of the project and its goals. We're going to be going to discussion at the end of all the presentations. So for those of you who are listening in, I'd encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A, or again, you can also use the chat function, but we'll be looking specifically at the Q&A for questions at the end. I'd now like to go to our second presentation, which is from the project Orbis, and will be presented by Orbis colleagues Grazia Consiglio and Iliara Mariani. Take it away.
Hello. Hope you can hear and see the screen. Oops, well.
All good, Ilaria.
Almost good. Now we are, sorry.
So, good morning, everybody. I take first the floor, but I will soon leave this to Ilaria. Good morning and thank you for organizing all this and the effort done. We will talk about this project, Orbis, that is dealing with creating a supportive environment enhanced by AI to, let's say, to test whether we can improve the scaling of deliberative democracy models. This is a project started in February 2023. We are more or less at the half of it. And this is, you can go on, and this is a project that takes seriously a challenge. The challenge related to the fact that, as you may well know, there are many models, actually some of them deeply trusted and considered how to say, effective in relation to the targeted processes or, you know, issues that they tackle. Nevertheless, we lack the existence of democratic ecosystems, large-scale democratic ecosystem that may still keep expanding and improving inclusiveness. This is so clear that we lack this, and through the project we try to improve some of these models by working on more effective and inclusive engagement, by improving the user expectation and the user experience, by trying to set in the very critical node that connect deliberation to the implementation outcomes, and the misalignments between let's say democracy needs and the features that the technology can provide. So what Orbis is doing is taking on board, and Ilaria will tell you more about this, some models, some of them large-scale attempt to, let's say, create better democracy environments, and understand what's going on there. What's going on with respect to the fact that these models still lack large-scale adoption, still lack to become real, shared, and accepted practices for inclusiveness and, let's say, also large-scale actions at this point, if we are lacking the link between deliberation and implementation. And we are doing this by making reference to some existing platform tools to, let's say, cover some of the issues which are listed in the bottom left piece of this slide, to understand whether we achieve by improving these tools to also be more effective in the scaling of these models. And with it, I leave the floor to Ilaria.
Thank you. So the way in which we are moving and the way this presentation is very much complementary to the one of AI for Gov done before, because we come in with a methodology that we are following and the way in which we've been co-creating and co-designing our entire system in order to better address existing needs. In so doing, we super value our pilots and the communities they are bringing in because they are expert of their needs. So we've been mapping what they are doing and the needs that emerge from their daily activities in order to understand how to better support them and also understand how technology can be adopted and adapted to very specific needs in aiming not just at fitting a very specific instance, but at them as models for the scaling opportunities, which often remain in the background. So actually, we inform AI-enhanced democracy deliberation in a trustworthy way by going through significant and constant co-creation with pilots communities for making requirements, deliberative and scaling journeys clear, and then we use an ethical approach with cross-disciplinary foundation, so coming from the different disciplines that the project engage. We use we are focusing on toolkits and guidelines for supporting inclusivity, especially of a less engaged and marginalized population. We are looking very closely to have privacy data protection and also AI explainability in the loop, so that a clear communication is informing who is in charge of taking some decisions rather than keeping the process obscure. And we are following across that an iterative participatory design process with a lot of cycles of co-design, which now will be shown. The super precious pilots are 6, and they are providing us amazing communities of users where to explore possibilities, and they're listed here, different scales, different nations, different needs, different models indeed. What we did was starting by working with pilots to understand their stakeholders and community, their level of deliberation maturity, the user scenario where we're already adopting, and the scaling opportunities they could find, so that we could inform the technical parts in terms of platform requirements, and also then inform the design of experiments as pilots to be run that will start for us very, very soon, like this week for some of the pilots. And through that, we are validating our research hypotheses. Specifically, we've been going through interviews, scenario elaboration, through co-creation and co-design, workshop in presence, and iteratively, again and again, in order to verify the tailoring, both a correct understanding of the needs and the tailoring of a solution on the specific expectation needs of our pilots, which have been always in the loop. So from pilots, we identified mapped deliberative blocks and moved towards the scenario, user scenario, in order to inform AI-enhanced tools. And we used different tools in order to get there, and we kept mapping the practices of our pilots against it while gaining more and more knowledge along the process. In so doing, we also went backward a bit from pilots to see the ecosystems, building them around them, not just in terms of a smaller community around, but the stakeholders ecosystem, so to understand which were scaling dynamics ongoing, but also the aspiration, the goal for that. And here you can see that we used that very much to understand how to then open up the design of the Orbis solution, because we are developing some a toolkit with some components AI enhanced and using platforms to accept them. But very crucial in all our discourse is the role of scaling, as Grazia was saying before, because we have a real focus on understanding how to support an inclusion of these democratic models, tools, and practices at different scales, from institutionalization to the cross-sector and cross-domain use, so moving across different contexts, and up to the level of becoming part of a culture in which we are. Also, in this case, we use our co-design approach to map consistently ecosystems and scale and processes with our pilots in an iterative cycle, so that we could understand how the process of the project could support them in getting where their aspirations were directed. And so the third part was that pilots and technology went in a loop, and technological partners and players went in a loop of information in order to understand which were the requirements that need to be satisfied, and to better not just fit them, but to tailor and revise the technological support. So co-design workshop with pilots in order to plan their deliberation activities, their sub-activities, and understand which AI tool could better fit them and supporting this. And this has been very iterative, while also being constantly informed by the theoretical framework of a project. So this is how our solution works, with users entering existing democratic platforms, through which they can then access toolkits which has some components AI enhanced, which have been developed within the project, and then through the human being who is in the loop for supervising what happens, the information about argument mining, explanation generators, feedback aggregation, and policymaker reports generation comes back to these platforms where pilots are running their activities, and come back to people. So this is also a part of how trustworthiness is given by having the human in the loop for us. And so this is another representation, and the way in which we go back and forth, moving across technologies, while indeed ensuring consistency with our framework and a responsible inclusive use. Thank you very much for following and listening to us. This was it from Orbis.
Thank you very much for that, Ilaria and Grazia. It's great to see the different approaches that exist within the consortium, and how all together you can see a very different range of strengths that I would hope that the consortium can bring forward also together, not just in the individual projects. I'd like to turn now to our third project presentation, which is from the ITHACA project. ITHACA will be presented by three of the participants in the project: Iliana Loy, Adrian Dragota, and Aristotelis Spiliotis. So I'll turn over to you now, ITHACA colleagues, for your presentation.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity of being here. I'm Aristotelis Spiliotis from CERT, Center for Research and Technology, Hellas, along with my colleagues from ITHACA project, Andrian Dragota from Simavi, and Iliana Loy from University of Patras. And we'll present you the foundations are developing ITHACA platform, which aims to be a digital interaction and collaboration platform for facilitation of civic participation in democratic processes with the use of artificial intelligence. We will be a little bit more technical than the other presentations, I'm afraid. So emphasis was given at all stages to produce a trustworthy by design system, and at first we'll look at the groundwork activities that took place to ensure this. There are various key factors contributing to the development of a trustworthy AI system, and this can be categorized based on the perspective that one is looking at. From the technical side, a system would need to be accurate, robust, and provide explainability. From the user side, we should prioritize usability, safety, and privacy of all users. And from the society part, there must be requirements placed for legal compliance, upholding the ethical standards, ensure fairness and accountability, and be environmental conscious. So the workflow to ensure the integrity of the produced system is to start from the requirements of all the stakeholders, examine which technical functionalities need to be there to accommodate these needs, and then design the components and the architecture that will handle the tasks from the technical point of view. So step one of the process was to identify all the key technical requirements. These were extracted by analyzing the needs and the restrictions of the relevant stakeholders. And to do so, we organized surveys and workshops with our stakeholders, who were clustered as the users, technical experts, data analysts, ethical and legal advocates. And they examined all and answered all the questions related to the trustworthiness of the ideal platform. Throughout these tasks, we extracted the use cases of the project, which will be used as a proof of concept and will be evaluated through our pilot cities with real users. So each use case defines the actors involved, the scenarios, the pre and the post conditions that need to be applicable, the quality requirements along with the technical ones, and the success criteria. From these requirements, step two was to identify the technical and functional requirements which are able to carry out as a process all of the aforementioned needs. And as you can see, we have divided the requirements into 9 different segments based on not only on the technical work that needs to be done, but also the evaluation, the assessment. In example, accessibility needs special care for the assessment output, same as it is with the security, the HMI, and so on. Here you can see all the functionalities for its technical requirements. I will not go through this. You can also visit the official ITHACA project website to get more detailed info if you would like. But you can see that trustworthiness was thoroughly examined since the stage of defining the requirements, and so most, if not all, of the functions addressed these concerns. In the next slides, you can see for the other 8 technical requirement segmentations, the functionalities that we're aiming at developing. And so we'll move to the next step, step 3, which is to develop the software and the hardware components that will carry out these functions. On the left of the screen, you can see a high-level representation of the main functional requirements and how these interact or supervise one another, which in turn need to be transformed into the components of the ITHACA platform. So now I will give the floor to my colleague, Andrian, to tell you about the architecture.
Hello, everyone. So we designed the system architecture, and we are in charge of the system integration of the tools developed by the colleagues. So we proposed the hybrid architecture between microservices and event-driven messages. The characteristics are modularity, that allows components to be loosely coupled and independently deployable, and scalability, that enables scalable solutions that can adapt to various workloads. Next slide. We have the representation of the architecture. With the data store in the bottom part, we have the tools developed by the partners, packed as Docker containers at the left. These write and read data from the secure API, and if needed to chain some events, we have the Kafka message hub. On the right, we have the client that will be developed on an Angular framework, a very mature framework. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everyone. So Telis and Adrian spoke about the designing and development process of a trustworthy civic engagement platform. However, the main purpose of this webinar is Trustworthy AI, and these platforms they are supported by AI systems that will run in the background. In order to render them trustworthy, we created supportive tools in order to evaluate these AI systems that run alongside the ITHACA platform in terms of fairness, security, and privacy. So the fairness tool, which is for the conformity of the fairness principle to promote equality, inclusivity, oppose any kind of discrimination, and render AI systems of the ITHACA platform more trustworthy and unbiased, employs objective fairness metrics such as disparate impact between group, generalized entropy, and so on, to evaluate fairness. Then we created the privacy-preserving machine learning tool, a PPML tool, that applies data concealment techniques to safeguard the privacy of the user. For this tool, we utilize differential privacy methods to perturb sensitive user data by adding random noise so that it would not be possible for a malicious actor to infer potentially identifying information from such AI systems. Also, we created a cybersecurity tool based on open source tools, which it applies for the security of the user. Telis, could you please move on to the next slide? Maybe your screen is... Oh, thank you very much. So to the AI cybersecurity tool to detect possible security breaches and threats within AI models. This was based on open source tools, as mentioned before, and it scans for malicious code in AI systems. Also, apart from these tools, we created a visualization mechanism to visualize events arising from the function of these tools. So the base functionality of this visualization component is first to visualize metrics, fairness metrics, and privacy metrics to evaluate the functionality of the tools. And also, these tools were tested at first upon a toxicity speech detection mechanism, which is essential for civic participation platforms. So we added a highlighting mechanism to highlight words that are deemed toxic by our AI fairness tool. So that's all for the tools to further evaluate the trustworthiness of AI systems that run alongside the ITHACA platform. So thank you very much. That's all for the ITHACA platform team, and we're awaiting your questions after the presentation section.
Thank you very much for that, Ileana, and all of the ITHACA colleagues. Again, as you'll see, a variety of approaches. And now it's my great pleasure to present yet another different approach to this wider challenge of trying to find productive ways to assimilate and face the clear challenges, but also clear opportunities that we see in this whole landscape of AI, big data, and democracy. So as I already mentioned, so I'm just trying to start my timer on myself and so it's hard to chair and do everything at the same time. And let me just share my screen. My name is Jennifer Edmond. I am Professor in Digital Humanities at Trinity College Dublin. And so I am also the overall coordinator of this project called Knowledge Technologies for Democracy. And I'll be talking a little bit about how we understand trustworthiness in the context of democratic exchange, and indeed how our specific approach to this is, again, very much in line with what we've been hearing from the other projects, but also a little different as well. So we come from the foundational understanding that the relationship between AI, big data, and democracy must always be understood through its mediation by culture. And if you think about some of the terminology we use to talk about what we want from AI, big data, and in this context with democracy, you see that a lot of that language really relates back to cultural issues. We want it to be human-centered or values-aligned or privacy-protecting or indeed trustworthy. And I'll point you just a little bit towards one of the publications of the project, which is our policy brief, our first policy brief, in which we bring out this whole issue of how concepts like trust, trustworthiness, responsibility, how these are all very much culturally determined, which can mean they can be culturally varied, but also that they can be understood differently by different people. That does not mean, however, that they're not incredibly and essentially important for the processes of civic participation and democracy. So we view this within a structure of influence factors. On the one side, we have the distributed control, the flexibility and adaptability over time, and the kind of the identity connection of culture. On the other side, of course, we have technology development, which is quite different, showing more of a centralized control and fast changing rather than adaptable, and of course perceived not so much as a part of identity, but perhaps a consumer choice we may make. Between these two, both of which have roots in and intersections with democracy and civic participation, we see that there's a number of different kinds of control measures. These control measures can be technological. Again, we've heard a lot of colleagues talking about the way in which you can put fairness and toxicity detection into systems, but they also need to be things that human beings feel are actually regulating the system in a way that is in line with their values and needs and desires. So we have this balance, and we're very much looking towards an over-reliance on what Morozov calls techno-solutionism. So we want to make sure that we keep very much that balance between the human, and the human need to be an actor and to feel agency in their own democratic processes, and of course, the wonderful things that we can actually facilitate and organize through the introduction of AI and big data tools. So we take these three intersecting perspectives of the technological advancement, the sociocultural change, and of course, the controls that mediate between them. And when we talk about technological affordance, we look not only at what the new and emerging tools can do, but also at economic models, business models, economic drivers. And in particular, we're interested in not just the building of systems, but also these human system interactions. I think many of you may say, why is she saying human system interactions rather than human computer interaction, the more common term used for this kind of relationship, and indeed for the field of study that looks at it. But we want to really make sure that we stress the fact that these are complex systems, and to look at the human and any particular tool becomes very difficult and too narrow, we think, for the kinds of interactions we need to be able to view. So we're looking at these human system interactions. And of course, one of the main systems that we're looking at is not just the human and the technological system, but the human and the cultural system, because culture and technology have this co-creative relationship with each other. And we look very much at the way in which culture can and does and has been shown time and time again to adapt to technological change, but also that where there are power imbalances, where there are biases, where there are inbred aspects of the technology that might be not in line with democratic values, that there is this risk that culture can be actually used against the individuals who are participating in it. And again, we believe that there is this possibility for controls, and that sounds like a very sort of top-down term, but I mean very much the way in which ethics act as a kind of an auto-regulation, or the way in which different kinds of institutions can act as an auto-regulation. So this may sound like a very much an authoritarian view of things, but in fact, it just views the fact that there are these mediating layers always between technology and culture. So that brings me to the aspect of the work within knowledge technologies for democracy that I'd like to highlight a bit more actively in this context of the questions of trustworthy AI by design. So you're certainly all familiar with the term human in the loop. We actually have been trying to develop more along the ideas of society in the loop, or indeed democracy in the loop. obviously, the idea of a human being in the loop of a complex system is difficult. And when we look at that in the context of democracy, it becomes even more so. The ideas that are built into systems are often ones of efficiency and of processing and of clear workflows from a certain kind of input to a certain kind of output. But unfortunately, democracy doesn't work that way. Democracy is inherently in a state of flux, in a state of needing flexibility, and in a state of somewhat inefficiency. Always, because when we have multiple people who need to come to a single goal, that will take a certain amount of negotiation, that will take a certain amount of easing of the tensions and compromise between the various actors and their opinions in order to come to something that can be actually a forward-looking position. So this brings me to this question of trustworthy, and this is a term that obviously we talk a lot about in our KT4D project, and whether or not trustworthy really is the goal that we want. And I think one of the things, we'll talk about frictions and tensions in a moment, and one of the things that I think maybe distinguishes our project is that we are actually very skeptical of the work we're doing in many ways. And in many ways, we feel that actually makes us perhaps the best people to be doing this kind of work or to be contributing to this kind of work, because the fact that we are querying on every turn the terminology we use, the imaginaries that we are supporting, and the ways in which this human in the loop, democracy in the loop relationship is construed, that gives us the opportunity to perhaps think a little bit differently about them. So when we talk about trustworthiness in the project, we think about, again, I've put the definition there from Longstaff, the ability to rely on somebody to do what they have said they will do, even when no one is watching them. And for us, this means that to extend trust, we need to feel both that there is an understanding of an alignment of values, but also an alignment of capabilities. This, to us, doesn't necessarily align with the ways in which we view systems. So these conditions are very, very difficult to meet, where you don't understand what the values are underpinning a system, because the system is perhaps too complex for that to be visually or immediately comprehensible, but also that there is this lack of understanding of the capabilities of a system. Where is data going? Where is data coming from? And perhaps we don't need to know those capacities, but this is, in general, the kind of underpinning we expect in a trust relationship. So this leads us to think that perhaps the whole idea of trustworthiness is not a metaphor that serves us well, because it leads us to confuse confidence in a system function with the all-important social risk-taking of interpersonal trust. Democracy is based upon the risk that I take as an individual that the collective is actually going to work in my interest because community is something that I rely on. That is very difficult in a relationship with a system. So we have developed what we call our Digital Democracy Lab. And I'm just noticing, sorry, this is a slightly outdated version of the slide, but I'll do the best I can with it. And this Digital Democracy Lab is an experience rather than a platform. For those of you who know Tartan Gillespie's work on platforms and, of course, all of that which has followed, we're very, again, suspicious of platforms that offer an image of ease of use, offer a kind of an efficient road from a question to the meeting of a goal. In the context of democracy, which again has this compromise, has this need to develop over time. So stemming from this skepticism regarding this kind of current human-in-the-loop approaches, including, I would say, participatory machine learning. We've just submitted a deliverable about some of the, I don't want to call it participation washing, but some of the compromises that exist when we talk about participatory machine learning. And of course, anything that is quote unquote by design. Again, when you say by design, you are expecting that this can be created by the system, but the values of system creators and the values of a democratic system may be quite different. So again, this doesn't mean to say that we don't believe that these approaches can be very powerful, but that we approach them with a certain skepticism. And one of the most important concepts for us is this concept of friction. And I have a picture of pill bottles there for a very specific purpose, in that if you think about pouring pills out of a pill bottle, you can get any number of pills. Whereas a blister pack, which is another way in which pills are delivered, makes sure that you're actually counting as you are accessing those items. And it has been shown that, for example, when the United Kingdom introduced blister packs as the primary packaging for medication, they actually saw a reduction in cases of over consuming of these kind of controlled substances. So we want to make sure that where friction is useful, friction is maintained in this democratic loop, in this democratic discussion. So therefore, we've come up with this Digital Democracy Lab, which is an experience, not a platform. It is not something we expect people to simply take and license and use, but rather something that is a technological artifact in which we're using different kinds of AI technologies, including LLMs and RAG, to look at input data, resulting profiles, and policy language generation. But again, it is a system in which there's friction, which is broken up in always encouraging the participants to be there, to be facilitated, and to actually feed back into the system. So the system is inherently and intentionally delivered as fragments, but fragments which leave a lot of space for that human intervention into the democracy system that they can then feel is a part of what they do. So that's all that I wanted to say. But again, I'm very happy to go more into details as we enter into the Q&A session of the webinar today. So I'd like to invite all of my fellow panelists to put their cameras back on. And I'll just take a look. I don't see that we've had any questions from the audience yet. But perhaps my colleague, colleagues in Trust IT can put any of those into the chat or into the Q&A as we go along. But of course, we're all very interested, and this is a great opportunity for us as well, because we talk very much about shared interests, but to go deep into the various projects is something that we don't have as much opportunity for as we might like. So I'd like to open maybe with a question to George and to AI for Gov around but of course one that I think any of the projects might be able to come in on, which is around how we can make policymakers and how they can really how we can create the bridge between the work that we're doing and policy work. Because obviously we have some policy sensitive partners within our consortia, and we have obviously the ear of the Commission. But how do we actually make the leap from the work that we're doing into how policymakers might take that up? Again, from an AI Gov perspective, but I'd really welcome any of the other panelists to come in after George answers as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Jennifer, for this question. From AI for Gov perspective, but I think that this is the case also from the rest of the projects. We have to follow to think three different aspects of how we can impact, how we can benefit the policymakers. The first aspect is the societal. This means to increase their awareness, to increase their digital literacy, the digital capacity in order to adopt the new technologies, in order to adopt the solutions that we develop. If we do not train and educate the policymakers, because these are the end users of the overall policymaking life cycle, if we do not increase their digital literacy, then we will fail in order to promote the results from the utilization of AI solutions. Moreover, we have to provide explainable, high interpretable solutions. The explainability in the final solutions, in order to be easy to be understand, easy to be interpreted, is a key aspect from technological perspective. We have to follow specific roadmap in order to provide enhanced explainable results. And the third aspect is, of course, to regulate the overall utilization and development of the AI solutions. To showcase that we have taken into consideration different laws, different legislations, GDPR, EU AI Act, and everything has been developed in alignment with these regulations. This will foster the overall trust and the reliability of what we are developing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I don't know if any of the other panelists, again, just raise your hand if you're interested in coming in on this question around connections with policymakers, because it's something that we in KT4D think is very important. We have 4 use case communities, 2 of which involve citizens, but in 2 different countries and language communities, and 1 of which involves software developers, but the 4th one, and actually in our numbering, the first one is actually policymakers, because it's quite important for us. And I think, George, you mentioned the importance of explainability. And that's obviously, you know, explainable AI is a buzzword, but I think if memory serves me, this is also something that is quite important for the ITHACA project as well. So, Iliana, I don't know if you're there, but am I right in remembering that explainability is also something that ITHACA is quite focused on, and that you also would have a position on?
Yes. So in order to render an AI system trustworthy, there are some principles that it should adhere. So some of them were already addressed throughout the ITHACA project, which is the fairness, security, privacy, robustness, and so on. However, we haven't neglected explainability. So there are some ways in order to evaluate the explainability of the AI systems that run in the background of the ITHACA platform. And one of those is to use explainable AI tools. But here we created our own mechanisms. And for example, a mechanism that we created was upon a toxicity speech detection tool that classifies posts from the ITHACA platform and comments being toxic or non-toxic. And we wanted to provide a feedback about how this tool decides how a post is toxic or not. So in order to do so, we provided a highlighting mechanism to highlight words heavily associated with toxic posts that are decided to be toxic by the AI fairness tool, with a color from a palette from green to red, indicating their level of toxicity. This seems like a simple solution. However, the most powerful explainable AI tools that are present in the literature right now, like Lime and SAP, they're also using similar mechanisms, similar highlighting mechanisms. So that's one thing that we've done so far to provide some level of explainability for some of the tools of the ITHACA, and we will create more similar mechanisms to provide more explainability for our systems.
That's great. Thanks so much for that, Iliana. And actually, it really ties into the question that's come through the Q&A from Reinhard Heil about whether we have a common definition of explainability. And I think, as you will have noticed, there's a lot of differences in the projects. And I think, therefore, we would actually have different definitions of explainability, not because there aren't good definitions of explainability out there, but because whether you're looking at explainability as something that merely happens at a system level, whether you're looking at it as fit for purpose for community engagement, whether you're looking at it as something that needs to operate across a system, I think you're going to get different nuances in what you emphasize, because obviously we create these definitions in order to be able to meet project level goals. So I think there is actually some variation, but not because we don't agree, simply because we're facing slightly different aspects of the problem. It's like the blind man and the elephant, you know, different people see different aspects of it. And again, encouraging my fellow panelists to come in.
I would like to say something, Jennifer, on that, because explainability.
Please, absolutely.
Yes, thanks. Because explainability, it's becoming something more than what it is now. I mean, explainability now, it can be a mean to describe how a system, a module is functioning, or to provide a disclaimer, and so on. But now with generative AI, and we are going towards a collective, let's say, intelligence. Explainability is tasked to do a little more. I mean, to wait, to examine and weight the different intelligence, and to provide the integrated, the collective result. So
Absolutely.
I think explainability has a big future, let's say, and a lot of potential to expand.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think it's an important concept for us to embrace, but also to kind of maintain our understanding of the complexity of as well. And of course, there's another term which has come up again and again in the presentations, which is that of trust and trustworthiness. And Clemens Ackerl in the chat has asked us if we can elaborate on our underlying conceptualizations of trust and trustworthiness, and the challenge of going beyond a mere understanding of trustworthiness as a technological reliability. Now, I kind of feel like I've already sort of laid open how in KT4D we look at trust as essentially an interhuman process, and are suspicious of the kind of the motivation, or the kind of the impetus to see that also as something that we can translate directly to a system. But again, I'd be very interested for maybe some of the other panelists to come in and say a word or two about how you view trust within your projects, and how that shapes the way in which you work. And Elara, I just saw you nod. I don't know if you're nodding to me, but I do think that Orbis is particularly interesting in this way. So again, I'd love to hear from you.
Yes, and we are also very, very much aligned to what you've been reporting, Jennifer, because our approaches are really like complementary in the way we put constantly the human in the loop, so that we don't leave unsupervised action, especially when we have reporting, summarization, clustering done by AI for working on a huge body of data which are coming in from large-scale deliberation, and we need to take something out of that, and we need to verify that what is coming out is reflecting what happened inside and doesn't have like deviation in the loop. So the trustworthiness is not just and only about data protection, privacy, and ethical issue in general, but also about the meaning that comes along, and how the original meaning is respected in the way it is reported. And in this, there is much work to be done, because unfortunately, AIs are stochastic parts. So they do not think and have, our sensibility in building the narrative as we could. So the way in which Orbis is answering this is by keeping the human being in the loop through those who are running the deliberation activities, we have responsibility to, call the AI to action, bring back the results, and see what comes out from that before sharing and making that public, especially when it comes to policy recommendation or something like that. It becomes super key, same as decision-making from people.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I particularly like your use of the word narratives, because again, trust does exist within a framework of the kind of the stories we tell ourselves, or the stories that we kind of draw from the world around us. And I think it's important to remember that we are beings that narratize, and that we create these stories and we use those to build trust.
But a multi-voice narrative, not a polarized one, not a super polarized one, not a scattered one, but an heterogeneous and not hegemonic one. So this is the kind of narrative I guess we are speaking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I'll quickly look to colleagues to see if anyone else wants to come in on this definition of trust. But we also have a very, very intriguing and very complex set of questions from Pablo Cereza. So I might just kind of bring some of those in and see if we can weave those. Again, quite different questions. So maybe different partners can pick up on some of them. So first of all, the question of concrete examples of the measures, technical, legal, or ethical, that we've used to comply with EU ethical and legal standards. Then a second question about difficulties in implementing these measures. Then another question about bias mitigation measures affecting the effectiveness and accuracy of AI tools. And then a question directly to me about friction. So I don't know if anyone wants to come in first on the ethical one. Again, this is something that we talk about a lot in the consortium. And Christina Bitterberg's question about how we see synergies comes down to this ethics. Unless anyone else wants to, I'll talk a little bit about some of the knowledge sharing that we've had on ethics, because it has certainly been something that has been difficult. And as I said, you know, one of the running conversations we have in KT4D is about how we want to build these systems because we are worried about them. And because we want to make sure that our skepticism goes into a prototype of this kind of system. And that, however, means that if you're approaching this kind of build from the position of a researcher's level of ethics, then it can become very difficult indeed. Access to data can become difficult indeed. Making sure that you're protecting your participants can be difficult indeed. Making sure you have the right balance of data access and protection of the privacy and indeed the dignity of the democratic processes can be difficult indeed. So we in KT4D have been very lucky in that we, for whatever reason, have integrated a partner with specific legal expertise in our project. And they have been very, very good about always being there for us in terms of opening up that perspective. So for example, when we were trying to decide how to handle our participant data, they went off and they created a very, very useful frequently asked questions guidance document for the project on how we would use pseudonymization and how we would make sure that that was legal and ethical. Again, Gabriele, I don't know if you have that Zenodo link. You might see if you can find that and put that in the chat if anyone wants to go in that. But again, it's a huge challenge. And again, I'd love to hear from George and Ilaria as well on this. So maybe George, you go first.
Yes, thank you very much, Jennifer. With regards to the different measures, of course, this is a big challenge of how we can measure, how we can assess the overall trustworthiness, explainability, trust of our approaches. I would like here to highlight the ALTAI, which is the assessment list for trustworthy artificial intelligence, that provides a concrete assessment tool in order to proceed with the final evaluation and validation of our approaches. Similar to ALTAI, different governments ranging from Japan, Australia, Canada, US, have also developed specific tools that can be incorporated in the overall assessment evaluation of our approaches. And in the context of the AI for Gov project, we have bear them in mind in the context of the holistic regulatory framework. The holistic regulatory framework has also provided 15 main disciplines that can be incorporated into the technical developments and the utilization of AI, ranging from fairness to accountability, to public engagement, to awareness. So it's very crucial to assess how these tools are being utilized by the end users. And this can also be achieved through surveys, through focus groups, through Delphi, different rounds of Delphi, and etc. that we incorporate also in the context of the project. And of course, in order to tackle the ethical aspects, we have also in the context of the project one legal partner that we always follow the DPIA and the specific regulations of EU AI Act in order to proceed with measuring the overall trustworthiness and fairness of our solutions.
Excellent. Thank you for that, George. Ilaria, do you want to pick up from there?
Yeah, again, with a very complementary perspective, bringing the loop. Just to say, I'm also the ethical representative of the Orbis project within a specific task force we had to put in place, because beyond all the development of ALTA, DPA, and documents that we put in place, we also had to make an internal task force to support our pilots in a constant dialogue with technical partners in order to understand what data should be provided, how to fragment them in order to avoid reconstruction of IDs, of identities, and to protect, again, by design, our data. In the meanwhile, we also went through, let's say, long journey of digital literacy. Not just so about what ethics means in the different way in which it applies, and the multi-level way to approach ethics in complex projects like this one, in which there are humans, AI interacting together, and the data are moving across different components, platforms. So beyond what happens in terms of data integrity, what happens in terms of correct and best way of structuring the data journey from the beginning to the end, but also explaining what I'm taking from you during your discussion with us, where your data is going, and how am I processing that along the way. And just to mention, we have teams among our pilots' activities, and so we need to be very careful about the kind of language we are using in order to make explanation clear to all. That is a mess by itself.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important, especially when you're dealing with vulnerable populations, to make sure that you not only have, again, the next question we're going to approach is about biases, and we don't want to make sure that our own biases as researchers kind of say, well, that bit isn't important. So having that oversight has been something that we've been very, very careful about, and and this is some place where we have explicitly shared knowledge within the consortium to sort of try and also predict possible oncoming or upcoming emerging ethical constraints we need to be aware of, but also to be able to share knowledge about how to best manage some of the constraints that we're finding ourselves faced with. So yeah, and it is actually quite difficult. We did a webinar within KT4D a while back, simply because that was inspired by the difficulty of, in complex projects, the way in which the ethical standards don't necessarily, that we're kind of taught to follow, don't necessarily map up to, some place where you have multiple different sub-projects going on in multiple jurisdictions. So that's something else that as a resource is sort of out there that people can look back at. But the next one of Pablo's questions that I really want to come to is this question of bias mitigation. Because again, kind of I mentioned it in terms of making sure that we have our ethical house in order. But of course, bias, we all know that data bias is a big problem. We all know that AI system bias is a big problem. And in particular, when we get into these sort of black box potential, decision-making about people's, personal values and freedoms, it's really important. And again, I know that this is a concern in particular in AI for Gov, where, again, this is where there's an actual kind of pipeline for bias detection. So maybe, George, I'll turn to you to kick off. But again, I'd really encourage the other panelists to, if you want to come in on this question as well, because it does affect us all. But again, from AI for Gov, a perspective, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Jennifer, and thanks, Pablo, for this question. For the bias detector toolkit, I would like to highlight that it has two-fold objective. On one hand, we have created a bias detector catalog that enhances and improves the overall awareness of the policymakers on how bias can be identified, how can be mitigated, what are the specific state-of-the-art approaches and cutting-edge approaches that have been incorporated in order to address bias, in order to increase their awareness about what is bias, etc. And if we are, on the second half, if we are talking about the technical solutions, we have a specific bias detection service, both on the data set and on the AI models. On the data set, we we ensure the overall completeness, the overall integrity, and the overall non-discrimination, let's say, of the data set, the raw data, speaking about demographic instances, different features, and etc. And with regards to the bias mitigation service on the AI models, we ensure the overall explainability of the AI models, and also we incorporate the AI Fairness 360 tool in order to ensure that our models have been developed and run in a fair and trusted way.
Excellent. It's really interesting. It's interesting because, for even though in KT4D we're very aware of all of the work on data bias, the approach that we take, again, because we have this, what we call this, in a very positive sense, this model that has a lot of friction and a lot of fragmentation in it. And I'll come back to that question of friction in a couple of minutes. We see, biases are always going to be there. The reasons they're in data is because they are in human beings, because we are limited in what we can see, what we can understand, what we can grasp, what we can appreciate. So for us, really, a lot of what we're doing around bias has to do with collective sense making. And it has to do with, Ilaria mentioned literacy as well. And this is another place where KT4D and Orbis have a lot that we share, is the whole concept that we need to be building not just system capacities, but also these complementary capacities within system users. Not that we think that the user is responsible for how the system operates, but rather that the better prepared they are to understand the system, the better prepared they are to use it responsibly, to use it for what it's designed for, not for something that it wasn't designed for. Again, as somebody who teaches master's students, the tendency to use ChatGPT for everything is this sort of paradigm example of how we can fall into the trap of believing that a very functional tool is functional for every purpose. So we really concentrate on this idea of collective sense making. So that's why in these digital democracy labs that we have, it's very much an open discussion. And we need to make sure that people are together with people who perhaps they share some aspects of their perspective on democratic participation, but perhaps there are some gaps. And they work through the system with a facilitator, with a set of experts, with the AI developers, and all of these perspectives are available to them. And for us, that's for us, that's the the bias detection system. But again, it's really taking that complementary perspective to what George has just said. And obviously the vision is that we'll have both. And I see, Ilaria, is that a finger coming up that you want to come in? Please.
Yes, envelope. Just to say that in order to diminish the bias that comes from also models trained on regular data sets, in Orbis, what we've been doing was getting permission and recording a lot of the debates that occurred in various stages of the project, so to inform our models and the training to better fit the kind of discourses that were expected to come later on, and therefore get adjusted of the kind of language, the different way of speaking topics and everything, so that you see in Latin we will say dot des. So we take something, we give something back, but it's a constant give and take in order to ensure that we are in a loop of constant sharing of information, building something, keeping building something and improving, not really like in a radical way, but an incremental way this time, because baby steps are ensuring us to go ahead in a controlled, safe, secure manner.
Absolutely. That's very, very nicely said. And again, captures a lot of the sort of the shared motivation and vision within the wider consortium. I'll come quickly to this question to me about friction. So this concept of productive friction comes from the design community. Again, we're very lucky to have designers within our consortium. And it really refers to in processes where you need someone to think. And again, the example I gave was in drug delivery. But I would say democracy is the same kind of thing. In processes where you need someone to actually stop and think, to have a process that is too slick, where people are not slowed down, where it's too efficient, can actually work against the goals of the process. And if you think about any of these systems, if you think about red lights on roads or stop signs, they produce a friction because you need to stop. They slow you down, obviously. But that's a productive friction. It means maybe you don't get as fast in some cases to where you want to be, but you will get there hopefully in one piece. So again, I would encourage you to look up some of these examples of, again, if you look for friction in industrial design, you'll find many examples. And again, it's something that's really inspirational for us in that. But it also, again, it's something that plays out at the level of sometimes the user interface, the visual design, the way in which you imagine these kind of interfaces. And I think that's actually a nice opportunity to turn a question towards the ITHACA team as well. Because within ITHACA, there's this kind of visual component, which again, we think of visual components as a kind of looking towards an end user. But I think that in ITHACA, I'm wondering whether or not this visual component also addresses technicians and maintainers of the platform as well. So Ileana, maybe you want to take that as a question to ITHACA.
Yes, thank you very much. So here, this visual component that I mentioned before is not primarily addressing to the user. It's mainly for the maintainer, for the technician, because throughout the life of the ITHACA platform, there will be somebody who will have an overview, the so-called human oversight, which is also one of the principles for trustworthy AI. So there will be someone who will have an overview of these tools and monitor both their functionality and how they will, let's say, progress throughout the lifetime of the ITHACA platform and try to update them and so on. So before I mentioned that there will be a visualization of metrics, fairness metrics, privacy metrics, and so on, and also this kind of explainability mechanism to highlight, for example, words for the toxicity speech detection tool that is also incorporated in the platform. So this is something that a maintainer will have overview. However, we will also try to have some kind of feedback for the user, but not to have all this information. We had a lot of discussions from partners from the consortium regarding this, because, for example, it's good to have some level of explainability for the user, but maybe so much information about which words are good to use and which words are not good to use will maybe for a user provide a way to circumvent the tools that we've already developed, and that's something that we don't want to. We want trustworthiness, but also we will try to help the users to know how to use the platform, but inside some kind of restrictions. It's not a good word to use restrictions, just to have some boundaries, let's say, since it's a civic participation platform. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, fascinating approach to that kind of tension. Was there someone else who wanted to come in on that? Okay, I wasn't sure if I heard someone coming live on the mic. This is great. And again, I know we're very much approaching the end of the webinar. But I've saved, the bulk of the response to Christina Bitterberg's question for the end, because where we see the synergies between the projects and where we work together, I think is a really, important and central question for why we're all here together today. And I mean, I hope in some ways, those of you who've been with us for the hour and a half have kind of seen where there are these sort of linkages, but I think that there's both generic and very specific ways that we go about it. And I'm going to warn my fellow panelists, I'm going to go through you one by one and ask you to kind of comment on this question of what the consortium means to us, again, above and beyond our own project. But just in terms of the way this has functioned, again, we were encouraged to come together by our project officer within the European Commission. And that might be seen as an intervention, but if it was an intervention, it's one we're very grateful for. Because again, even though the impetus came from up above, the benefit has really been felt across the projects. We have a standing, roughly monthly meeting where we get together, and some of the items that we always make sure we share knowledge on are things around communications, what kinds of activities, what's the state of play in each of the projects, but also there are things like technical developments where we think we can actually share knowledge, and in particular, this issue of ethics has come up a lot. So the function of it has both a very generic level, but there's also okay, we released this deliverable. You did a deliverable on that. I need to see that. So there really has been this sense of actually enhancing all of the projects through the ability to knowledge share. So that's a kind of, hopefully that leaves space for my colleagues to actually expand on this. And I'm just going to go through in the order in which we originally presented, which means that, George, I'm going to go to you first. From an AI Gov perspective, what do you see as the kind of the benefit or the kind of the mechanisms of the consortium?
Thank you very much, Jennifer. At first, despite of the obvious knowledge sharing that you just also mentioned, increasing all of us the knowledge with regards to the technical developments, the ethical landscape in the Europe and internationally. At first, we have to bear in mind that this webinar would not be feasible without the strong collaboration and communication between all of us. Sharing our knowledge with the wider public, sharing the different insights that we have gained from our project. This is how we make this feasible. Of course, we are targeting also in common joint actions with regards to scientific publications. The technical coordinators, as I am also the technical coordinator of the AI for Gov project, we are in strong collaboration, communication with each other in order to identify the cutting edge and the novel technologies that can be incorporated in our platforms in order to increase the performance and the accuracy of our implementations. And of course, to impact on the scientific community, we are also foreseen to proceed with joint papers and publications.
Very good. I think that covers a lot of ground. But of course, I'll turn now to Ilaria. And again, Ilaria, if you want to say specifically about the UK AI festival that you kind of brought together. But again, feel free to go beyond that. But I think that's actually a really nice concrete example of something that the consortium's done together that you were very much at the head of.
Well, maybe I give a floor to Grazia Concilio because she was moderating that that very day, because we keep going in a lot together. Yes,
so
here she is.
Right.
Oh, sorry, I can't switch on my video, but because this was closed by the administrator of the meeting, no problem. I think it's important to first make a point about, at least within the consortium, obviously, we are constantly trying to cover and to keep covered the gap between those in the consortium who, let's say, are more passionate on the vision of the project and those who have operational stakes, let's say. This is, I think, a very standard okay, I would not call it friction, but this is, a dynamic, I guess, that is everywhere in projects like ours. In this, so in a sense, what we are experiencing, also considering the different contests that we are creating to share and at the same time challenge our vision and achievements, is that let's say, while discussing the dynamics within democratic processes, so dialogues, deliberation, how to develop the trust, the agreements, the convergence, the conflicts that may arise, the polarization, and so on. The vision that Orbis is also proposing to understand to what extent even very successful models are still slow in making a difference in democracy at the societal scale. So one of the best examples that we always use is participatory budgeting, which in context like urban contexts or even larger than that, maybe is very promising, is well welcomed by citizens all over the world when this model is adopted. Oh well, there the reasoning is quite different and is very hard because this is a discussion of not just related to the mechanism or to the the rules of the democracy, which are very clear in a model like participatory budgeting. But this means that we need to understand what kind of obstacles and what kind of practices, decision-making practices, policy-making practices, and power use practices, these kind of models are, disturbing, let's say, are trying to be disruptive. So when we introduce this topic, then we realize that the gap between the knowledge that we are developing in a research context related to supporting democratic topics, the discussion that you have done, which is, for us, like as important as gold, is open a new big door. There is a new big pathway to be explored to understand why even so largely welcomed democracy models are not yet able to make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's, I think, sorry, Grazia, if I could just come across you, because we are actually already over time. But I think it's a really important point that, and again, one of these ones that we would very much agree on. Just for sake of fairness, I'll turn very, very quickly to the ITHACA team. If you have any kind of last words as we're rushing out the door and holding our participants longer than we expected to, just about the kind of the value of the consortium before we close the webinar.
Jennifer, our consortium, okay, we were a more technical team today, but we had a lot of support. We have from the ethics and the legal part, we have a really great team. And we, apart from the technical side of AI and trustworthiness, we see that these concepts are extremely important to build these tools. And also, we try to follow up on the legislation. We see now that with the EU AI Act, there is the first step, but there is a lot of progress that needs to be done. A lot of it is more generic. We need a lot of specifications to further proceed. We also try to follow the code of practice, which is underway until April 2025. And so I think we are on the right track, and there is still a lot of work to do. I think we all are passionate in ITHACA, and we're very glad to also hear the rest of the projects and the progress they have done, because we also learned a lot from their point of view. I don't know if Ileana or my Andrian wants to add something, or if time is over,
might,
because
I was going to say we are over time, so we might
yes,
just.
Jennifer,
You've given it such a lovely final note there. So maybe we'll wrap it up there. But I'd just like to thank all of our attendees for coming along today and encouraging you really to keep in touch with all of us as a consortium and as individual projects. We hope to have another one of these webinars coming up in a few months' time. And again, it's an important issue in particular at this moment, and we're doing what we can to come together to solve these problems or to address these problems. We can't solve them, but hope that we can engage also with you as our attendees and our audience in a wider circle to address these matters of great concern. So again, thank you very much, and thank you to all of the panelists, and hopefully we'll see you at the very next webinar. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, everyone.
thank you.
for
Thank you
everything.
very
Very
much.
much. Have a good day.